In 2023, I had been a Christian for going on 14 years, and I thought I had a pretty good grasp on biblical theology. My community seemed consistent, and I thought I was living out my faith, not perfectly, but pretty well. But then something happened thousands of miles away, something that I'm so sad to say is still happening even now. And it was something I just couldn't be silent about. This ongoing horror has revealed something terrifying in myself, and it's also revealed many terrifying things within the church-going community in the world. And I think we need to talk about it. Hi, I'm Vanessa. Welcome to my new mini-series, What Gaza's Revealed. Disclaimer before I get started, I want to make clear that this video and this series are in no way to make what's happening in Gaza about myself or about Christians at large. Nothing I've experienced, no lows I've reached, no loss I have faced, and no pushback I've received can compare to the daily horror and unthinkable realities that people in Palestine are enduring on a daily basis. For me, they are at the heart of this message, and it's for them and people like them that I'm doing this series, because I never want those who claim Christ to find themselves again on the wrong side of a situation like this, for the sake of the precious people who are victims that we should be defending, and for the sake of God's glory in us. So for this first video, I just wanted to share a bit of how, as a Christian, I've arrived where I stand on this issue. When October 7th happened, I, like most of the world, was shocked and horrified, and I just felt so sad for the victims that day. I was shocked at everything modern Israel claimed had happened, and I prayed for it to end, and that the hostages would be released and return home. And thankfully for those left inside of modern Israel, there were no added victims after that day. And naturally, after what happened, I heard modern Israel was responding. At that time, with the knowledge I had then, I didn't see anything wrong with them responding. And had it been up to me at that time, I probably would have stayed right there. But thankfully, God and my sister had other plans. She urged me to look into what was happening to Gaza within the days after the 7th. And I'm sad to say that at first I did brush it off, and I was indifferent, because I assumed that whatever she was trying to show me would just be similar to what I would see happening in any other war, and I didn't want to see that. But through her persistence, I eventually forced myself to look at what she had sent me. And instantly, as a Christian and as a mother, I was horrified. Child upon child upon child being pulled out from under the rubble of what was their home, the place that was meant to house them and protect them. Their skulls cracked open, being pulled out without a leg or an arm. And what hurt me the most was seeing children, their bodies torn and broken on dirty hospital floors, left alone to take their final breaths by themselves because their family had already been killed or they were also injured, and the doctors were too busy and overwhelmed with patients in order to be there with them in those moments. So I was seeing these horrors daily, and I was learning of the civilian casualties mounting in the thousands each week. And yet people I respected, people who said they were Christians in my life, were supporting it, and they were pledging their allegiance to this modern state, the one who was committing these crimes. I had hoped that they were just ignorant to what was actually happening, that they weren't seeing these same videos that I was seeing. But only later did I learn that even with being informed about the horrors happening, even that wouldn't change their minds. Their minds were already made up because of the ideologies that they held to. And this is where it started to not make sense for me, because they were upset about October 7th because civilians were attacked. And so they were able to look at what happened, what Hamas did on October 7th, and condemn it. But yet those very same people turned around and supported modern Israel as they were attacking civilians and doing the very same thing Hamas had done, and on a far greater scale. The hypocrisy, the double standard, and really the evil of it all left me feeling so broken, just brokenhearted, and really just in despair. I was up and I was down. I was in grief. I was angry. People were publicly claiming that Christians are to support what was happening simply because it was modern Israel doing it. So to fight this narrative and to be a Christian speaking up against it, I began to post and I began to share about what was happening. But sadly, that upset people in my life. They didn't like that I was calling out Christians and saying that this isn't what we are supposed to stand for. The world is watching. The world is seeing your posts. They're seeing what you're supporting and what you're saying and how you're using scripture. And I didn't want that to be where it was left off for people. I needed people to know that the Bible doesn't support this, that Christians are not supposed to stand by this. And instead, friends that I had been walking with for years became distant. Church conversations on Sundays became awkward. Friends that my husband and I reached out to for counsel and for prayer, they rejected our plea for help. And even a friend who was close to us for over 10 years said that I was deceived and that I was spreading and believing propaganda. And that's something I'll never understand. How is the suffering of people propaganda? Why didn't they see modern Israel circulating the images and videos of October 7th as propaganda? Why is it that these videos of children and the elderly and women and fathers, why is that propaganda? Just because they're Palestinian? Just because it's modern Israel who's creating those crimes? And that's when the double standards really started to become blatantly clear for me. And this lack of moral clarity left my husband and I feeling totally alone in our community. And we began to question ourselves, feeling like we're in the twilight zone. Like, are we wrong? Have we been wrong this entire time about who God is and what he says we are to be as Christians? Were we wrong to oppose the slaughter of children? Is anything modern Israel does an exception to God's commands? None of it made sense, yet every single person we talked to, we just were grieved and shocked by their responses that were just all echoing one another. And that honestly plunged me into a very dark place. I was questioning the point of living. I was questioning God. But rather than letting me stay in that dark place, God met me there and he led me to his word again. And I just dove into the Bible because I was desperate for answers. I couldn't understand how, after 14 years of reading the Bible and sitting under teaching, how we could be getting it wrong. It just didn't make sense to me. And so I read and I reread my Bible, and just the more I did, the more he made it clear that what is happening in Gaza is not from him. It is not of him. It cannot be. It's blasphemous and heretical to claim that the God of justice, the God of the Bible, would ever be for injustice or evil anywhere. Yet the same people who are willing to call out the injustices in Ukraine and Sudan and Syria, and they're willing to call those things evil. Yet those same exact crimes on a far larger scale are taking place in Gaza, and yet they can't call it evil. Why the double standard? Why the partiality? Why the contradiction? In search for answers, God led me to Christian Zionism and dispensationalism. These are ideologies I had known about my entire Christian life. Again, I came to faith in a dispensationalist and Zionist church. It wasn't until after October 7th of seeing the fruit of what these ideologies were bearing. Not only the devastating consequences for people, real human people, but also for the testimony of God before the world. People are seeing the rotten fruit of Zionism and dispensationalism, and it is not bringing them closer to the Lord. It is making them run away from him. And yes, I understand that in response to some of the most faithful Christians, people's hearts can be hardened, but it shouldn't be because of our unchecked hypocrisy and our approval of wickedness that is turning people from the Lord. Our example should be of God's loving kindness and us clinging to what is good no matter the cost, not justifying evil and walking in step with the wicked. Right now, only 60,000 is reported as the death toll, but experts are saying that the death toll is likely in the hundreds of thousands, minimum about 300,000. And unlike any of the other horrors going on in the world right now, thanks to the brave journalists on the ground for almost 700 days, we have been able to live stream the horrors taking place inside of Gaza. And my question is, if you don't have a righteous indignation and a desire for justice against evil you can see, then what would ever cause you to truly care for injustices that you cannot see? If you don't care to demand for the end of the crimes that you are paying for in Gaza, as most of us in the West are truly what is making it possible to continue with our tax dollars, then what would ever cause you to seek justice and peace for situations in which you have no influence over? Through diving in God's word, he reminded me that his heart breaks for every victim of injustice. And it's not just for ones who have the right theology or politics. He taught me again that true Christianity calls us to seek justice for all people, to defend the vulnerable no matter their background, and to care about the world outside of ourselves. I learned again that when we make faith about us versus them, we've already lost the plot. That when we can hear about children being starved and murdered and terrorized and feel nothing, and even shift blame in order to make ourselves feel justified in feeling nothing, then we find ourselves so far away from Jesus. And I mention children because it's a baseline. If you can't feel compassion and care for an infant, for a toddler, then what does it say about the quality of your compassion? And most importantly, I learned that God is calling me. God is calling you and all of us through His Word to something far bigger than the small, comfortable, and compromised version of Christianity that I and so many of us have fallen prey to live. God made me take a hard look in the mirror and see the errors of my ways, not just my communities. And I have people commenting on my videos who are just coming around to see this situation rightly, and they grieve the fact that they have stood on the wrong side of this, and they are just so saddened at the idea that they've allowed themselves to be misled. So this series is for Christians like that. This series is for Christians like me who thought they were living all right, but were actually not. So over the next several weeks, I want to walk through this journey with you and kind of just rehash all of the things God has shown in me and within the church-going community at large. And it's not because I have all the answers, because I definitely don't. I definitely don't. But I believe God is calling the church to some serious heart examination. And I think Gaza revealed the desperate need for us to do that. And if anyone is watching this and feeling defensive, feeling like I'm talking about you, talking down about you, know that none of this I say to shame anyone. I'm not saying this to position myself as better than anyone, because I know I'm not, but I'm trying to lovingly challenge you to examine your ways, to consider what your example has done to the testimony of Christ in your life and the world around you. And perhaps the defensiveness that you feel is actually God trying to get your attention. I know when I was feeling that way, it was Him trying to get mine, because sometimes He desires to grow in us things that we didn't even know we needed growing. Until the next video, I was hoping to pose a question that I really hope you would mull over and think about. Is the way I've been responding to what's happening in Gaza, is it providing the world an accurate representation of Jesus? Because how you answer that question might reveal more about the condition of your faith than you may realize. But if you've enjoyed this video, I would really hope that you would share it with someone who you think might enjoy it too. And please be praying for Gaza, because as I'm recording this video, it is still happening. Children are still dying of starvation, and people are still being bombed and killed, including children. So be praying for peace, be praying for an end of this, and do whatever you can to be a voice on the stage so the world can see that God doesn't stand for this.